And we're live. Let's see, do we have audio? Let me know if you can hear me, our usual. I don't know if I've got my stuff set up right. Let's see. There's always a bit of a delay, so it takes a minute for you guys to see what I've just said. So now I'm going to sit here and wait a minute to see if audio is working. Actually, it looks like it's frozen. Why is this frozen? There we go. Valerie reminding me to record. You can see and hear me. Okay, we are good then. Thank you for joining me tonight. Late. I forgot that when I had the hack last week, I reset my password before I knew what was going on, which not a bad idea to do anyway. But when I reset it, I never logged in on this computer, or I haven't since then, and my internet, whatever, wasn't working, so that was a separate issue. I restarted it and then found out, yeah, I can't log into my account on this one. So I had to redo that and get it all set up and the two-step verification and all that fun stuff. Tons of stuff. Anyway, so what I'm doing tonight, I'm working in oils. This is just kind of me blocking in loosely what my concept was. I'm going to repaint over all of this anyway. But this was done in acrylics. You could paint the same type of underpainting in oils if that's what you're working in. This is on a Frederick's Blue Label Ultra Smooth canvas. And if you guys do not follow me on Instagram, or if you didn't watch the video today, the end, I don't know if you can see all, like, there is a lot. See if I can get out of the way of the camera. There are just canvases. It's a lot of canvases. Lots of paintings in our future and some really cool sizes and different types that I have not used before. So I'm excited about that. So let's see. Max wants to know if I do sepia art. I have. That's not what this one is going to be, though. So yeah, that was, I've got a lot of canvases behind me, but this one is the Frederick's Blue Label Ultra Smooth. This is not a sponsored video. While they have provided me with canvases in the past, and those ones back there as well, anything I share is just my own opinion. And I was actually a huge fan of Frederick's before they had ever provided me with canvases. I had already sworn off all other ones because of problems I'd had in the past. So anyway, just throwing that out there for transparency, so you guys aren't like, you know, she's being paid to say this. I'm not. It's my favorite stuff. Another product that I actually wanted to share with you before we get started tonight, one of the problems we have with oil paintings is that they are wet. And so if you've been painting on something, you can't pick it up and hold your canvas like you can with an acrylic painting, because acrylics dry very quickly, oil does not. So if you're going to a class, or let's say you are painting outdoors and you want something easy to travel with, these things, and I put a link in the video description, the Canvas Schlepper. This thing is amazing. It just slides on the back, and it only works with stretched canvases, but it slides right on the back onto the stretcher bar, and you now have a handle for your wet painting. And it's the most amazing thing ever. One of my students actually bought this one for me, and I love it. She may have bought me a different one and I lost it, and I bought this one. She bought one of them. I had a student buy me my first one, I know that. But those you can get on Amazon. They used to carry them at Hobby Lobby. They do not anymore. I don't know why, because actually I think I do know why. It's probably because no one knew what they were or how to use them. But they're really, really cool. Get that canvas out of the way there. Okay, so getting to start, let's see. Linda says no sound. Is anyone else having problems with sound? Okay, no, Valerie still hears me. Okay, so I have not set up my palette yet. What I use when I'm oil painting, this is a Masterson's, I believe, palette. It has a lid that seals it in. It's kind of like Tupperware. It seals the air out, so your paint will stay wet a lot longer. So if you're working on the same painting like this one, let's say I worked on this for 2 weeks, the majority of my paint that I store in here is going to stay wet the whole time unless I've mixed it with my mixing medium, because my mixing medium is fast drying. I then take a canvas board. This one is a 12 by 16 that I just wrap in tin foil so it's easy for cleanup, and I stick that in side of there. That is my palette. Really, really easy for cleanup, and my favorite way to work. So when you set up the palette, let's see, I know I'm going to be using some turquoise colors. Let's find the colors I want in here. You don't need a lot of paint. And I like to set my palette up in the same way every time. Where are my paper towels? I use Viva paper towels. This is the only one that I use for oil painting because they're very cloth-like. Probably should have had my pliers out so I could open these easier. Oh, yeah, need to find those. I usually keep a pair of pliers near me when I'm going to have to open paint, because sometimes they really get stuck in there. So the amount of paint that I'm going to put on my palette, I don't know if you can see this very well, but it's not, I'll show you after I put it on there. It's not very much. A little bit of oil paint goes a long way. If I were painting with acrylics, I'd put a lot more paint out there. But a little bit of this really does go a very, very long way. Let's see what other colors I want to add to this. Ooh, indigo. This one looks pretty. Maybe we'll add some of that too. Now, when I set up my palette, I set it up in the same way every single time. And I'll show you once I get the colors on here, because everything looks the same. Brown, blue, black, it all pretty much looks the same. So if I know blue is always in one spot, brown is always in another, black is always in this one spot, I don't accidentally grab the wrong color and not find out till I hit the canvas. And that's a problem that I've seen a lot of artists have, is getting the wrong color on the brush, because you don't... Yeah, I want that one. You can't easily tell what color it is just by looking at it. So knowing which color is where will make your life much easier. So it's a really, really good habit to get into. I actually used to write on the back of my students if they got disposable palettes. I would write on those, for a minute I thought I just put the color in the wrong place. I would write on them where I wanted their paint to go every single time, so that they got in the habit of it. And it's not that one order of paint is right and one is wrong. It's just getting yourself into the habit of putting colors in the same place every time so that you don't make those mistakes. So a few more colors. I probably should have set my palette up before I started, but I decided to have problems with the internet and logging in instead. Always fun times. So with this painting, one of the things that my main goal with this, these trees look like they're just going to be regular trees. They're not. All of the bunches of leaves are actually going to be clouds. I'm going to have it raining coming down. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the background here, if I'm going to leave that kind of cityscape in the background, but that's the whole goal. The whole idea with this is I want to, and I'm going to play, or I think explore this idea further in the future. Right now, my real goal is just in figuring out how to make the trees look like their clouds are the leaves. So that is my plan here. It's largely an experimental type thing. Okay, that's probably all I need out of that one. Okay, the rest of the color should go pretty quickly because I don't need a lot for this. Remember, if you want me to see your questions, do the @Lachri Fine Art so that it highlights your question or my name in orange. If it's not highlighted, I'm not going to see it, and it'll look like I'm ignoring you, even though that's not really what I'm trying to do. Okay, I usually will put out more of my titanium white than any other color. I seem to go through that more quickly. What other colors do I have in here? Zinc white. Yeah, I may need a bit of that. That's going to be my transparent white. The majority of the paints I'm using today are the Winsor & Newton Winton color. I have artist color, I'm sorry. The Winsor & Newton artist color. I have a few of the Winton color still. And then my Weber's Permelba black and titanium white. Okay, I think that's a good start. Do I not have phthalo green? How did I manage that? Okay, so, and I'm going to put the liquid in the center. I won't show you that, but I just want to kind of show you how I set up the palette. So I know white is always here. Normally, if I'm using yellows and oranges, I will have yellows, reds, and oranges here, magenta, purple, green, blue, brown, and black. And I always set my palette up that way. And then I never accidentally grab black and when I meant for blue and then not find out till I hit the canvas. So with the liquid, this is the one that I use because it is Liquid Original. This is a fast drying medium. So what I paint tonight, if I paint in thinner layers, this will be dry by tomorrow. So I'll be ready for my next layers tomorrow. I started off as an acrylic painter and I don't have patience for waiting for paint to dry for 2 weeks. So this one is my favorite mixing medium. And for my brushes, I hold them in these brush containers, and I did not put a link to this in the video description, but I get these from Dick Blick. Make sure if you get your brush holder, get the big ones. They have the big one and the little one. The little one, you will fill up so much faster than you think. You may think you only have a few brushes now. You will fill it up way too fast, and it's just kind of not worth spending the money on the little one. So definitely recommend getting the bigger brush holder. And I'm missing a lot of brushes. They must be in my other holder. Pull some of these out. trying to decide what I think I might end up using tonight. I don't know, we'll just pull a bunch of them out. Picks by Lee says, how was your birthday besides the awful catastrophe hacking? My birthday was just another work day for me, nothing special. I actually, funny thing about that, I knew I had a lot of painting to do that night, but I figured, oh, I'll just do it that night. I got my work in the day done early, so I got to play a couple of hours of Warcraft, which I don't normally get to do, and especially not in the day. So looking back, I'm like, wow, I should have painted during that point before I was stressed. So that night, I wake up getting ready to start painting, and that's when the hacking happened, and all of that. Yeah, everything kind of got put on hold there. So I ended up running late. I didn't even finish my cheetah painting until Sunday night, I think, because it was supposed to be finished Thursday night, but I just got too stressed out for that. So besides that, my birthday was just really a normal work day. Okay, I want to show you how I'm mixing the paint, and I don't think you can see this well. Hold on. Let me make sure it's on camera. Actually, I can do it this way. So what I'm doing, try to see if you can see this, my liquid is moving. I'm thinning the paint out so that it's not super thick, and this is creating a nice translucent color. And my whole background, yeah, I'm going to mix some zinc white so I can lighten that up. Ooh, too light. So my background, I'm going to have to add, let's see, definitely going to need to add some green to that turquoise color, because it is too blue for what I want. So when you're mixing a teal or a turquoise type color, just adding a bit of green, especially a cool green. Let's see, that one is not going to work. What color am I looking for? This actually probably will work fine. So this one is Terra Verte, I can't talk. And it's a almost bluish green. So that is going to mix the color that I want better. Matt says, what medium would you recommend to get an impasto effect? I don't do that often enough that I can tell you which is better than another. Honestly, I don't want to give you bad advice because it's not, I've done it a couple of times with some of the Smart Art Box stuff, but it's not something that I really do myself. So I don't want to give you bad advice there. So I'm going to go with, I don't know. There's a better color. So get some more green in there. And with this one, I'm probably going to let my brush strokes show a lot. I'm going to kind of glob the paint on a little bit more than I normally do. And I want to create some texture in this background. That's going to be a big thing for me on this. I want my background to be a sort of turquoise type color, and I want the trees to be very gray, very obvious that they're clouds and not actually tree leaves. Red Writing Noob wants to know what I'm using, and I think I might have forgotten to put it in the video description, what I'm using to make it dry faster. It's called Liquin, Liquin. If you go to my website, Lachri.com, under the supply list, there is a list with links to, I think, Amazon for the one that I use. Chloe wants to know what I do in my free time besides art. Errands, usually. I don't really have free time. That's not a big thing for me. It's constantly spent working. It's kind of funny. I had a girl on the hacking video recently comment how it sounds like in the video talking about the hack, how I'm very selfish and it sounds like all I care about is money and myself, and how artists that she respects teach for free and blah, blah. She's going on and on about that. I'm thinking, how funny. Do you not work? Do you not know what it's like to have to pay bills? But yeah, I don't have free and especially with me, it made me laugh because I'm like, all my time is spent making videos. So it's not even like I could work another job and still make videos teaching people. I have to pay bills like everybody else. So it was kind of funny to me. You're thinking, I don't have free time. All my time is spent doing this. So it's weird when people judge you for odd things. The internet's fun. But yeah, I don't have a lot of free time. I do like playing World of Warcraft when I have time. I try to play a little bit every night. I'll do dailies and stuff. But I'll do that like right before I go to bed because I found that when I paint right until I go to bed, I can't fall asleep. I'm too like worked up over the whatever I'm working on and things I want to do it, and things I want to change and all of that. So playing the video games, that definitely makes it easier. If I play for like maybe an hour, half an hour before I go to bed, that makes it much, much easier. Sometimes I get more time to play, but that makes it easier for me to sleep. So that's probably one thing. I would say read, but mostly I listen to audiobooks while I paint now, because I don't really have time to read, which works out better because of my back and my neck. Looking down at a book, I'd have to like hold it up and it gets kind of awkward. So reading's nice because I don't have to look down to read, and it doesn't hurt my back. Victoria says, if I gesso my own board, will I get the same smoothness? Thanks. You can. You can get something similar. I've done this quite a bit. I actually have some of the new canvases that came. They're the Dixie series, the heavier weight. I think they're the 20-ounce ones. I'll probably use those mostly for my pouring medium because that works better with a thick canvas. But if I wanted to use any of those paintings, including the round ones, or the canvases, those round ones have a lot of tooth to them. So what I will do is usually take my Liquitex gesso, paint over it with I use a sponge, so I get, or a sponge brush, those square ones, so that I get really smooth coverage. Get it as smooth as I can. I usually do 1 or 2, depending on how smooth I want it to be, 1 or 2 coats of gesso, and then I take a sandpaper around a 400 grit and just sand that down until it's smooth. And you can get a really, really smooth surface that way. So that's what I do, because there have been a few times where I got canvases on sale and it's not necessarily the tooth that I want, but I can fix that with gesso and sandpaper. So yes, you can, to an extent. They'll be a little bit different. Anthony wants to know if I've tried any other oil paint brand other than Winsor & Newton, Gamblin, Grumbacher. Grumbacher I have, and I really like them. I have a few colors by them. One of the main reasons, honestly, that I've stuck with Winsor & Newton for so long is it's easy to access. It's easy to get. Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Joann's, everyone carried that brand. And so that was largely why I would buy it. It was just easy to get a hold of. When I started painting, buying your art supplies online wasn't really a thing. So I bought what was accessible, and then I got used to them, and I kind of stuck with them. I have some, is it Williamsburg? And I actually just got, who is it? Golden. When they sent me the airbrush paint, they sent me some samples of these little teeny tiny tubes of the Williamsburg oil paints. And I have used those before. Those are nice as well. The only oil paints I really hate are, I want to say Dowler and Rowney, or Dowler, I don't know how to say it. Those are terrible. Reeves or Reeves, those are terrible. And when I say terrible, I'll explain why in a second. And Bob Ross, those paints none of those work for the techniques that I use. And the reason for that is those paints, well, I don't know what the Dowler and Rowney and Reeves, what their goals are. But what I found with Bob Ross, they're intended to be painted all wet into wet. You don't do any glazing. So what was happening was when I had students that would bring them in, and they do 1 layer of paint, they would let it dry completely, and then once it was dry, they dried for a week. They come back the next class and a week later and glaze on top of it, and the first layer would pull off, it would lift off the canvas, it would reactivate. So they do not work for my techniques. So those ones I do not like at all. Matt wants to know the best way to store oil paint. I store it in just buckets. That doesn't really have any fancy, keep it upright, like markers. You don't want to lay up and down, you want them laying flat. Oil paint doesn't really have anything like that. I wouldn't keep it in a car or in the heat, but I've never, and heck, I've even stored some of mine when I used to teach in California. I had stored some of mine that would stay for a day or two in the car, and I never had any problems. But there's nothing special or anything you really need to worry too much about with that. Brandon wants to know if I have any general tips for painting or drawing clouds. Well, I'll kind of get into that when I get going. With clouds, I would say to start with, if you're new to painting clouds, get some reference photos. It's not that you need to copy every poof in the cloud, every single thing, but you want a general idea of how those clouds move, and having a photo to look at is going to make that much easier. For me, I don't have any, I'm actually not using a reference photo on this one, which is very unusual for me, but I kind of want this dreamlike state, and I think that's going to happen better if I work from my memory. But normally I would say get a reference photo just so you can see the movement of the clouds. It's easy to think all clouds are people tend to make them all baked potato shaped, which does not look so natural. So that would be my big tip there, is just get some reference photos and copy generally what you see. You don't need every single thing to be exact, just close to get a feel for those clouds. Sarah says, what would you recommend for a beginner painter as far as a canvas? What are your opinions on canvas pads? Canvas pads are a great way to start, especially if you're working in acrylics. You can just take, well, you can do it with oil too. Tape it to a board though. Don't just work in the pad. Take your canvas out of the pad. It's a sheet. It's like a sheet of paper for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about. Take it out of the pad and tape it to a board of some sort. It could be a piece of plywood, just something so it's not sliding around on you. But no, those are really a good way to go. Frederick's makes some that I really like because then you still have the surface. It's gessoed in a way that the canvas is nice and the paint glides nicely. Some of the less expensive, I mean, I know a lot of art supply stores now make their own and try to sell their own generic brand. That's why most of the stores don't carry Frederick's anymore. They've all shifted to their generic paints, their generic canvases, and I hate most of them. The only generic that I really like are the generic Hobby Lobby paint brushes. I love their Taklon and their synthetic hog-haired brushes, but their paint, I don't like their acrylic paint, the generic paint, or their canvases that much. And I've had too many problems with their canvases, especially, but I've had the same problem with the ones from Michaels and Hobby Lobby. Warping like crazy over time. That's not okay. Or just not, they're not made the same. The way that the canvases are primed, it's just not the same. So it's hard because it's like if you're just learning and you're just practicing, Hobby Lobby does make their smooth canvases that are okay, kind of. They tend to warp. Once you start selling, I would not recommend those. They've just had too many problems, or I've had too many problems with them, I guess I should say. So, something fairly smooth. If you're painting the style I am, if you're painting with a palette knife, that's going to be different. You're going to want a canvas with a heavier tooth. But for what I do, I like the really smooth ones, but canvas pads are a great way to go. I would not recommend canvas boards for oil painting when you're a beginner. While I do occasionally use them now, when you're starting off, those are hard because one of the problems that a lot of students have when they first start oil painting is they make an absolute mess. Every paint is all over their hands and all over everything. Well, some of these colors are toxic. They've got lead in them and different things, depending on which brand you're using, which colors. So that's just something to be aware of. You want to try to be very clean. And on canvas boards, there's nothing to grip to. With this painting, when it's wet, I can hold on the edge of the canvas and move it around as needed. If it's canvas board, you can't easily do that. And so when you're new to oil painting and you have a tendency to make a mess with it anyway, I don't like canvas boards. They just are too likely to slide around. They're harder to control. So I don't recommend those to get started with. Eventually, sure, once you're used to them. Simone wants to know where my studio assistants are. The chicken is in his cage in the other room. He's not allowed in here when I'm oil painting. Actually, he won't be allowed in here for a while now, until it's completely aired out after I've painted. And let's see, Jesse and Echo Studio Assistant number 1 and 2 are in their crate because I don't want them. Every time I start to talk when I'm doing podcast is when I've really experienced it. They'll be good. They're laying down, and as soon as I start to talk, they're like, oh, we've decided we have to go outside right now. Or one of them will decide, I'm going to get sick on the floor right now, and I don't want to have to deal with that while doing the live stream. So they're just in their bed. Their crate is big and comfy. It's like their own huge room, basically. So they've got lots of room. But that's where they are. Sarah Makes Art says, do you have a preference between the Liquitex heavy body and the soft body? And do you mix those and the basics directly? You can mix them directly. You can just layer them. It's however you want. I like the soft body better than the heavy body for how I paint normally. I have a ton of heavy body. Heavy bodies are really good if you're painting thick, chunky brush strokes. You really want everything to show. Then the heavy body would be my choice. For the Liquitex pouring medium, the soft body is my choice. But the reason that I like the basics more than any of those is the basics, like I've used here, it has a very flat surface. And the way that I layer, that usually works better, at least for my beginning layers. The heavy body and the soft bodied Liquitex both are much more highly pigmented. So you do get a bit of a difference there. But it depends on what I'm doing, I guess would be the answer. Each works better for different effects. Anthony says, heavy body versus soft body acrylics. Can you just water down the heavy body to get soft body? You can to an extent, but you still get different types of brush strokes when you thin something with water versus the soft body, whatever is in it that, I don't know the science behind it, that makes it soft. They're very, very different. The feel is very different when doing that. So you, like I said, I do thin down the heavy body, but it's still not the same. And the thing that I don't like with heavy body is it dries super fast, like so much faster than my Liquitex Basics. So I don't like that. Denise, I'm not going to try to say your last name, says, do you know of Monet Mart's Art Supply? I don't. I can't tell you anything about it because I've never even heard of it. Herbs Rule says, my Blizzard order came. I thought it had canceled, but it arrived. I was so excited last week. I said, that's cool. What did you, I don't even remember what you ordered. Patty wants to know what the legal situation regarding the hacking cybercrime. So that's weird. I don't know for sure what's going on originally. Okay, so I'm with Studio 71. That's who was hacked. That's my MCN. They originally said that no personal information was lost. They got in through the back thing and they were able to change. That basically it wouldn't really affect any of us. Well, as it turns out, few days later, we all get an email from the hacker group. They emailed all of Studio 71's accounts or people who are with them and let us know that they were the ones who hacked. They wrote a story on their website about Studio 71. Go to their website to read the article. Yeah, no, not that stupid. And hopefully no one else is that stupid either. But that's so frustrating. It's so, I hate people like that. Anyway, so they're trying to still play out like they're doing everyone a favor almost is what it seems like. Well, then we all get an email from Studio 71 telling us, oh yeah, they got all your information. Congratulations. They said that their team is looking into it. As far as they know, they got, I think, our email address, name. I don't know what else. I hope they didn't get more information because we have our tax information Studio 71 has to have since they're the ones who pay us out our YouTube ad revenue and all of that. So I'm hoping that they didn't get social security numbers in that. I don't know. Studio 71 didn't say one way or another. They did say that Google and the FBI are now involved. I don't know where that goes from here. I don't know what all that means, but yeah, that's kind of crazy. So we don't really know. We got that email yesterday. And I'm like, I hope Studio One starts providing us with like LifeLock or something, because holy crap, that's kind of serious, and we still don't know. But the thing is, I've seen where a lot of people, and we'll see how Studio 71 continues to handle this, but I've seen where a lot of people who were with them kind of had a meltdown on how much they hate Studio 71 and this is their fault. And it's like, the thing is with hackers, they can get into anything. If you follow these specific hackers have gotten into a lot already, but hackers can break into pretty much anything. Nothing's going to be completely secure. So I don't know. I have a hard time at this point being too mad at Studio 71. Again, we'll see how they handle that long term, but I'm not going to jump to, oh my gosh, they're so evil, this is horrible, because it could have been any of the studios. This is the one they chose. So as far as I know, I haven't seen any evidence that says that they got to Studio 71 because of their accounts being less secure or anything like that. I don't know. So, okay, what I'm doing right now, back to the painting. This one is a Royal Soft Grip brush. I don't think I have a link for this in the video description. I should have. I think I may have a link to a website. You can buy these on my website, though, if you go under oil painting supplies. But these brushes shed like crazy. Thing is, so I don't use them for acrylic painting. I love the texture for blending out with oils with these. And the other thing that I like with these is that they're super cheap. So even when they shed a lot, and you'll see me continuously pick hairs out of this, it's not that big of a deal to me because the paint dries so slow that I just take another brush and scoop out those hairs. So no big deal. So that's why I've continued using these. I've not found another brush that has the same texture that I like just as much. But like I said, because it's oil paint, it dries so slow, it's not a problem for me to pick those out. With acrylic paint, you don't really have time for that. So I've never liked these brushes for acrylics. But for oils, I'm a pretty big fan. So what I'm doing are little half circles. I just want to create a bit of a texture there, and I'm going to come back with more paint into this after, but I want to kind of blend that out a little bit. So yeah, we're waiting to hear back what happens with the hacking. I still don't know how this may affect my account because I know I'm still coming up on search and results now. But the other side of that is with YouTube, when you make changes on titles and descriptions, it can take a few days, a few weeks for it to really show up on the search engines. So we don't know how that's actually going to, I don't know if it's going to affect me long term or not with SEO and how all of that works. So it's still kind of a, well, let's see what happens. But I hope, being that Google, I don't know if FBI's been involved with them on past hacks, if this one's more serious, because I don't know. So that will all, hopefully they will keep us updated on that. But I still need to contact them and ask, when you say they got our information, what do you mean by that? Like, are we talking social security numbers, or are we talking just our address? Because that anyone can find anyway. That's not a big deal. But they also said that they think that it was mostly just a phishing scam, not a getting the personal information for anything else. So, and if we get contacted by companies trying to get us to give out personal information, not to do that. That was it. But yeah, so we still don't know a whole lot. Whoops. I scrolled too far on the questions. Herbisroll got a fairy dragon plush, a dark whelping, a white murloc, Illidan, and Deathwing Pup. My husband got the Illidan too. How cool. I got another, so I have two now. I got the fairy dragon and a white and pink baby murloc. I already had the purple, and I just saw hairs. Where were they? I already had the purple and the orange one. So what happens, these brushes will get to a point, if they start getting to where they're creating brush strokes, instead of taking them out, you can wipe them off. Like this area I was going to blend out anyway, so I can just kind of wipe it off onto the dry area of the canvas, or I can dry it off onto a paper towel. But if it continues creating, like right now, I can see it's still creating a lot of brush strokes. That tells me it is time to put that one down and grab a clean one. So I always have a lot of these brushes because of that. So I'm always able to switch out, pick out that hair. Anthony says, is this painting gonna family friendly? Are the trees going to wear clothes? No, they're gonna be nude trees. This is about as close to a nude painting as I get. Oops, scrolled too far. I got Andrew says, what is the difference between transparent and opaque airbrush paint? Part of me thinks that it's kind of self-explanatory. One is see-through and one is opaque. Is that a good answer without being too... So here's the thing. I think I'm hilarious, but I have a tendency to come across as just being really witchy, but with not a W there. So I have to tone down what I think is hilarious in my comments sometimes. Yeah, no, one's opaque, one's transparent. Rachel says, can you mix Liquitex Basics with Artist Loft Academic Level 1 paints? Artist Loft. I don't like Artist Loft. Those are it goes back to being kind of a generic-y type. I don't know. I don't like them. You can mix them, but I wouldn't personally use them myself anyway. Those are, what is that one? I believe it's Michaels or Aaron Brothers. It's their generic. Don't like any of the generic paints. So while, yes, you can mix them, I don't know that I would bother. So I'm probably going to end up doing a couple of layers to get my background where I want it, but I want to create a bit more texture into this. So what I'll do, just pull that into there. And then I'm going to take a paper towel and some paint thinner and pull some of this off a little bit to create a textured look. Rob is being nicer and explaining the transparent and opaque better than me. Thank you, guys. You are less of jerks than I am. I just think everything's funny. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take my paper towel, dip it in a bit of the paint thinner. And I'm going to pull some of this off just to create some different textures. This is going to let that brown show through, but when I glaze over it tomorrow when this is dry, it'll allow me to have that textured background that I'm looking for. I'm just letting it pull off some. I don't want to wipe this. I don't want to create smears or smudges for this look. I'm just dabbing. It's kind of like making a faux finish. Yeah. Kayla says, so witchy without the W. So you're itchy? Yes, that is exactly what I am. No, it's funny. I listen to the podcast sometimes, and the Colored Pencil podcast that I do with John Middick, and I'll think that I'm hilarious, and I'll listen to it going, wow, I sound like a witch. Like, didn't come across quite how it was in my head. I thought I was being funny, but I just sound like I'm, like, super moody or something. Yeah. Sometimes my humor does not come across as intended. So I'm not sure how much you can see where I've pulled off because of the glare. That's going to be one problem with this, is that I've got a really high glare. Working with oils, they're super glossy. So I do see a few more hairs that I need to pick out though. So we'll grab those. You do want to make sure that any hairs you've got in there, you get out before it dries. Once they dry in there, they usually do not come back out. Rob says, I know you're using oil, but an acrylic question, Liquitex transparent mixing white, soft versus heavy body. There's no question involved in there. Yes, they work. I may have the soft bodied transparent mixing white, and I'll probably start using that more often than my heavy bodied. But I use it in such a small amount that it doesn't really matter to me too much. If I was painting a lot, I would probably make sure to use the soft body, because it's it's closer to the Liquitex basics than the heavy body is, if that makes sense. Anthony, zinc versus titanium white. Zinc is going to be your more translucent, has a very blue it's a cool white. The titanium white is opaque. Sandy, how do you back up video files? Just did this one time-lapse video and the file got huge. I have an external hard drive and I save everything. And then when one external hard drive gets full, I buy a new one. But you want to make sure that you save all of those. That is really, really important. Because let's say I had everything on YouTube. YouTube goes down, or like we had with this hack. That hacker, if they could have deleted all my videos. If I don't have a backup, now YouTube apparently does have things backed up. But let's say they didn't. Let's say YouTube, for whatever reason, decided to pull everyone's videos. Let's say YouTube goes out of business. I don't have a copy of any of those anymore. So it's very important to me to have a backup of all of those. So yeah, the external hard drives work really well. Carla says, I just came on and I'm reading all the funny comments. Let's see. Jody, your question did not highlight quite right, but I did catch it. So if I don't answer you in the future, if it's not highlighted right, that's why, because it's not highlighting the way it's written out. Those of you who are watching this after the fact will have no idea what I'm talking about. We have a chat window when you're live, and you can highlight someone's name that makes it easy for me to see. So that's why we keep bringing that up. So I'm sure to catch you guys' questions, because I don't want to ignore you. But Jody says, I know you've said you can do too much on a layer and create mud, but is there such a thing as not doing enough before you let a layer dry? I'm sure there is. I mean, you can probably come up with the situation, like any potential, like if you think, whoa, what could you possibly do too much or too little of this? The answer would probably be yes. I'm sure somebody somewhere has not done enough, but basically for me, as long as everything looks kind of smooth, you don't have like that roughness. I think not doing enough would be, this camera probably is not going to show it, but I've got a roughness, the little dots in here. That to me would be not blended well enough if that was an area I was leaving. So I guess that would be an example of that. So I'm sure I really do think, though, anything you could think of is probably possible. So I'm using some Payne's Gray, or actually this one may be a charcoal gray. I don't know. I think this one is a charcoal gray, with some of my zinc white. And I'm just going to kind of softly blend those in. I want the ground to feel somewhat foggy. I'm going to blend that into the background as well a bit. Brandy says, is it okay to use different brands of paints on the same piece, or is this something you try and avoid doing? No, I almost always use different brands. In this case, when I'm oil painting, I'm almost always mixing my Weber's Permalba Black and White with my Winsor Newton paint, or even sometimes with Grumbacher. I have a couple of colors of theirs that are like this burgundy magenta that's really pretty. If you guys live in the North Texas area, if you look up Azel Art Supply with an A-S-E-L, I believe, Art Supply, they are cool. It's a smaller shop. They tend to be more expensive, but they have so many supplies in their store that you don't find it like Hobby Lobby or Michael's. So it's a dedicated art supply store, and they've got some really cool stuff. Also, great place to get Frederick's canvases because they're always 50% off. So if I need to paint a canvas that I don't already have, that is where I go. Or I may email Frederick's and beg. Either way. But yeah, I regularly mix brands. I don't really mix with acrylics just because I generally really just like the Liquitex brands. Their paints just work so well for me. Although I may give Goldens a try because we'll see. I'm thinking I might try out some of theirs. They said that if I mix the matte medium with it, it'll give me the matte finish that I want, and I want to test that out. Part of me finds that hard to believe because it seems like it'd be too good to be true, because then I could use any paint and get this type of a finish. But we'll see. Vladimir says, I told my friend about you and she said, she's like the chill art teacher who would not hesitate to drop kick you into the moon. Wow. And you can see Valerie has highlighted how to do the Lachri fine art so that it comes up in orange. If it doesn't come up in orange like that, I won't see it. Also, check out our moderators, Valerie and Dad Jester, or the Art of Joseph Fincham. I'm not sure which account he's moderating on tonight. But if you check out his channel, The Art of Joseph Fincham, they both have, Valerie has some really cool woodworking videos, and Joseph Fincham has some really cool paintings. So check out their channels. It's kind of a nice thank you for helping us with moderating this, because I cannot do that while painting. I mean, I can multitask, but that would be a bit much. And I do have links to both of their videos in the video description, or both of their channels, I should say. I just scrolled too far. Again. And still wow, I went way too far. Patty Picasso says, I use tweezers for the stray hair. It is a necessary part of the kit. Yeah, that would work. I actually don't have as good of luck with tweezers as I do just using a kind of stiff, dry, clean brush. Like, this is a cheapy. It's very, very stiff. It's supposed to be, I think, a synthetic hog hair. It's just those cheap, I call them scrubby brushes. But those work better for me. Tweezers, I'm just not coordinated enough with. I can't get the hair out as well. Okay, I'm going to pull some of this gray into my buildings. And with these, I'm just kind of creating the hint of something in the distance. I don't want super detailed. I'm not painting windows in these. I just want that hint, that dreamlike state where you know something's there, you can see it, but you don't see detail in it, if that makes sense. Or maybe I just dream like a freak. And that's kind of the look I'm going for in this one. Like I said before, this one is really an experimental piece. If I like how this comes out with having the clouds and the moons, or the clouds and the moons, the cloud and the tree combined, I want to do something that's more planned out and more detailed. And obviously I have enough canvases behind me now to play with that. But this is kind of my experimental piece where I just want to loosely paint and get a feel for what that might look like. Rob says, thanks, I now realize I didn't ask the question, which was the difference between, but you still answered my question. Oh, you're the best, thanks again. Okay, good. So that was the question about the transparent versus, or what was that one about? The two different Liquitex paints, I believe. I don't remember. My brain is just gone. There is a weird sound outside. I have no idea what that is. Okay, moving up. I'm trying not to scroll too fast. I keep doing that every time D.D. Fletcher wants to know what reference photo I'm using. I am not. This one is something I don't do often, where it just, I mean, all of these are things I've painted enough in the past. Trees, clouds, a stream. I mean, this isn't something I really need a reference photo for, but I don't want a realistic look. So this is very different than how you've normally seen me paint. So I'm going to start getting a base for these. I'm going to come through with the tree trunk later after. Amanda says, recommendations for a good quality brush, brands and features of quality acrylic brushes. For acrylics, I've mentioned this, was talking about this earlier. If you've got a Hobby Lobby near you, I love their generic paints. They have their Masters Touch brushes. Their Taklon bristle and some of their synthetic hog hair I really like as well. Those ones I really, really like, but it depends on what type of effect you're going for. Those are good, but mostly Taklon bristle are probably the largest majority of the type of paints that I use, or type of brushes for acrylics. Anthony Cassidy says, I mostly use watercolors. Lots of watercolors. Recommend limiting the number of colors you use. Is that a thing with oils and acrylics? Absolutely. And I would say especially when somebody is getting started in a medium. It's really easy to get a full set, like a set that has 48 colors. You want to use all the colors. I would not start out using all the colors. Pick a handful. I'd say 5 colors or less to start. Makes it way easier. And then maybe black and white on top of that. But even the 5 colors is on the high end. Don't try to use every color in your kit. It definitely is much, much harder to control. And eventually you can get to where you are using more colors and be more comfortable with it, but I would use less. When I first started oil painting, well, actually it was the same for oils, but when I started acrylic painting, I had a red color. I can't tell you which red, I don't remember, but I got a red, a yellow. I did not get orange because I could just mix that. Now, I was really broke at the time, so the reason that I got fewer colors wasn't because I was some sort of a genius and realized that was going to help me. The reason was I didn't have the money for all of the colors that I wanted. So itchy eye, sorry. I had gotten that. I got a green. I usually use 2 greens. I had phthalo green and then a hooker green, or chromium of oxide of chromium. I always get that backwards, whichever one it is. I had a brown, like a Van Dyke brown, just a sort of mid-range brown, Mars black, titanium white, purple dioxazine, and violet. Those were the only colors that I really had in my entire set. I didn't start adding more colors until more recently. I pretty much, and yellow oxide. I pretty much just mixed from there, and that's how I learned to color mix. And I think it did me a lot of good unintentionally. I had no idea that was going to be so helpful for me, but it allowed me to understand color better and just start with a smaller color palette. Don't try to use every color you can get your hands on. It's just so much harder to control. Denise says, how many art pieces can you be working on at once? Well, everyone's going to be different. I usually would recommend if you have a hard time finishing something, work on one at a time. It makes it more likely that you'll actually finish that piece. But, I mean, I don't know that there's necessarily a limit. I would recommend 1, unless you're oil painting. With oil painting, I might get, if I was going to be doing a lot of glazing, let's say I thought this was going to take 10 layers, 10 glazes. Each glaze, I'm only going to really paint on for a short amount of time. I mean, even tonight, look how much coverage I have on this. I'm almost done with the point I need to be before I have to stop and let this dry. So if I wanted to paint for 8 hours in a day, it might make more sense if I was only working in oils to have 3 or 4 oil paintings going at the same time. So I could work on one for a couple hours, put that to the side to dry, and work on another for a couple of hours, put that to the side to dry. So that would be one scenario where I might recommend doing more than one at a time. But in most cases, I recommend artists finish something before they start another one. Sorry, scrolled past too far. Let me try to find where I was. Come on, keep going. Wow, I am really far away. Okay, here we go. Victoria says, do you paint oils a la prima? And do you think about that? And do I think? I'm not sure I understand the last part of the question, but paint, I mean, it depends on what I'm doing. I don't always, I don't normally, but usually the only time I've done that recently was with the Smart Art Box projects because that's what some had called for, but not normally. Normally, I like to work in layers. It just gives me the result that I like. Although I'm playing, I mean, here, this is going to be a bit different. I'm really letting my brush strokes show a lot more than I normally would. So I'm just kind of, like I said, this one is very experimental, but I'm kind of liking the idea of letting some of these brush strokes really show. And especially on some of these clouds, I think that that's pretty much what I'm going to go with there is leaving these, I'm not going to blend those out. I'm going to leave each of these brush strokes. Anthony Cassidy says, is that my voice really sound like that thing been cured by the videos? I'm used to how my voice sounds. I don't like how it sounds. I've had people tell me I sound like a chipmunk on speed. And that it's annoying as, and then insert swear word, but it was stretched out to be like a swear word that would reach across the room. It's actually really funny, and it's something my husband and I walk around quoting regularly. Anytime something is said to be annoying, he'll comment, your voice is annoying as, insert word here. It's kind of turned into this ongoing joke for us now. Some of the comments I get are ridiculous, but I've definitely gotten used to. I mean, I know that that's what my voice sounds like. I'd rather have a prettier voice, but that is not a thing for me. But no, like when I start editing the video, I don't listen to it and go, is that what I really sound? I mean, you kind of get to a point after you editing over 800 videos, you know that's what you sound like. The Artistic Guy says, why is it bad to put acrylic over oil when painting? Because you don't want to put a water-based product over an oil-based product. You have problems with our archival issues. It's not going to stick long-term, and it can crack and peel and cause problems that way. But you can do the reverse. You can put oil over acrylic like I've done here, and that's fine. I need a few more brushes. See, I'm turning and twisting this brush to get variation in these brush strokes. Now I'm going to come through with a deeper gray on a lot of these. Jody says, do you have a certain got to have it oil colors in your palette? Oh, that's a hard one. I don't know. I've recently started collecting a lot of them, but I've always been a fan of chromium of oxide or oxide of chromium. You know what? Let me just grab it and I will tell you because I keep saying it wrong. This one I like because it's kind of an opaque green. Oxide of chromium. It's somewhere in the mid-range. It's kind of a warmer green, but not super warm. But it's very opaque. So when painting landscapes, I've always really liked that one for certain things, just because I can quickly get a lot of coverage with that as needed. I really like olive green, sap green, all of the greens pretty much. I want to own them all. Browns. Van Dyke brown is kind of my must-have brown. It's kind of an in-the-middle type brown. I also like raw umber, raw sienna, burnt sienna, purple dioxazine. I just don't, the colors you mix, if you're mixing purple, if you want a true purple, mixing it on your own, it just doesn't I don't like it. It doesn't come out the same. I really like how it looks out of the tube. So that one is one. Deep violet, or one of the magenta colors. I don't know which one it is. I don't remember the name. I use several. But that's a color I need to have. Permanent red hue, I believe, is one. Yellow ochre is a definite. Naples yellow. Naples yellow is on my must-have. I love Naples yellow. Of course, titanium white, unbleached titanium white. I'm trying to think which other ones. Phthalo blue, ultramarine blue. Those are the two like must-have blues for me. Phthalo and ultramarine. I have other blues, but I have to have those too. What else? I think that's the majority. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but those are kind of my main must-have. And a yellow, like a lemon yellow or some sort of bright yellow. And from there, I usually will mix orange. I have some orange paints, but I normally just mix it on my own. Glenn wants to know what I think of water-based oil paint. I hate them. I don't like how they feel. And I always, anytime I talk about my dislike for them, someone like gets mad at me because they love them. You're welcome to love them. I don't. I've always worked with real oils, and that's just what I prefer. I used to try, I've tried water-soluble oils, And from somebody who has worked for so many years with real oils, that I don't like the feel. They may be a great solution for some people. I'm not a huge fan. And they still have odor. They still have, they're not like, I don't know. I just don't see the real benefit myself. People say, well, you can wash the brushes with water. I didn't find that to work out that well. I was not that impressed. That to me is not worth the plus, even if that did work well. I just didn't like them. The ones that I had bought, I ended up using after a few attempts with them and not liking them. I ended up just using them with my regular oil paints and thinning them out, but I've never liked them. Just personal preference. It doesn't mean, and I've seen artists who worked with the water soluble oil and their work was phenomenal. So it's not like you can't do amazing things with water soluble oil paint. They're just not my preference. Kelly wants to know if I'm listening to or reading anything good this week. I actually listened to, what are they called? The Arcana. Let me look it up because it's actually been a really good book. The only problem is I've gotten to book 4 and I don't even want to finish it. I'm just so bored. As good as the story has been. The Arcana Chronicles by Cressley Cole. Those have been pretty good. It's kind of like end of the world sort of thing with supernatural stuff or like gods basically. Like kind of the Greek gods and that sort of thing. Oh, sort of. I don't know. It's interesting. It's a different take on certain things that I've not heard before, but I cannot get myself to finish it. There is a moth in here. Go away, moth. Before I name you and keep you. But that one's been really good. I just started another one. I haven't even finished the last book in the series because it got to the point where I'm just like, it's the same thing in every book and I'm getting kind of bored with this. Can we, like, something. It almost like soap opera feel, where a soap opera, you could watch it for an hour. I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch this, or my mom used to watch this. It was like an hour would go by and almost nothing new happened. It's the same drama in all of them, and that's kind of what that one is starting to feel like. I'm just finding myself getting a little bit bored with it. But that one, it is a good book, though. I will say that. I just can't get myself to finish the last book for some reason. Dolphin Plus wants to know how old my chicken is. He was born in July, or hatched in July. So what is that? 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. No. Yeah. 12, 1, 2, 3, 4. So he's what, 9 months old? Yeah. Wow. Counting is super hard. And I still had to do that on my fingers. Math, not my strong point. He's actually going through his first molt right now, so he's losing all his baby bird chicken feathers and growing big bird chicken feathers. He's actually got a couple of tail feathers finally. He broke all of his other ones. So you can see how I'm leaving my brush strokes showing. I let my background blue blend in with the gray, my light gray that I started with. I let some of that blend in. I wasn't trying, I didn't have to mix a blue to get that color in there. I just let it happen. I let it mix from my brush just touching the outside edge, stuff that had blended in. And now I'm adding that gray in on top of it and just blending. But I want to let those brush strokes show. I'm not using very much paint or very much liquid at all. Carla wants to know what kind of camera I use for my reference photo. It is a Canon 6D. And the lenses I use, there's a bunch of them. I've got, I don't know, a bunch. So it's hard to list off. I don't know which lenses they are. But the camera itself, it's a wide or a full frame. Yeah, it's the 6D, and I love that one. That one's been my favorite I've used by a lot. I was really lucky my friend, because I was looking at another one that was much cheaper. My friend's like, nope, just keep saving and get this one. It's better, and it's nice. Let's see. I scrolled too far. Where did it go? Wow, it really scrolled too far that time. Keep going. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're caught up. Vladimir says, what would you say is the most low maintenance painting medium? Low maintenance, I would say acrylic is easy to clean up, so that's cool. Although painting Inktense, those are one of the easier ones to clean up. I actually really like painting with those, and I use that almost like watercolor pans, where I use the blocks and kind of mix the water into that and then paint it directly to the canvas. But that one's probably easier. Oil painting is a pain to clean up, but easier to teach, easier to learn, I think, because the blend, I mean, you see how I'm just like, I'm not worried about the blending. It's just going to happen. I can take my time. With acrylics, you've got to work a lot faster, and that can be a challenge for a lot of people new to the medium. So I would say, I mean, low maintenance wise, acrylics are easier to clean up by far, but they're also a pain to learn to blend properly. Laura says, when you are done with this oil painting, how long will it dry cure, and will you treat it with Damar, I think you mean Gamvar, varnish? How long before you can ship it to a client? With this one, I'm painting, we'll see. I don't know. I may end up painting really thick chunks of paint on this, in which case it's going to take that much longer to dry. But after, I'll be able to put Gamvar on it. That one is by, it's Gamblin Gambar. Gambar is the varnish that I use, and that can be applied as soon as it is dry to the touch. But if I paint thick chunks on there, if I push on the chunk and it's still like wet, it's moving, then it's not ready to dry. But normally something that I paint in very thin layers, I'm okay to ship it within, I'd say, about 3 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks. It just depends on how thick I've painted. So that one's kind of hard to answer. But yes, I will definitely be putting a varnish on it, and the Gamblin Gambar is my favorite. Kimberly says, I must be really bad. I usually have one of each medium going at once. Darn attention issues. Yeah, and see, if that works better for you and you're actually finishing each of those paintings, then there is nothing wrong with that. My way is not the only way or the right way. It's just what works for me. When it ends up being a problem, though, for artists working on too many at once is when they don't finish things because they've got too many projects going. But other than that, I mean, if that works for you, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're finishing them. Matt wants to know what type of or brand of easel I use. This is an H-frame easel. I have no idea what brand it is. It's probably something generic. I bought it on clearance at Michael's back in, gosh, probably 15 years ago. I've had it forever. Maybe longer than that. But I've had it for a very long time. That was one of the things that was really nice when I used to teach there. When stuff would go on clearance, I was usually at the store so I could see it and grab it before anyone else did. I've gotten some really good art supplies that way. But I was just a teacher, not an actual employee at the time. So, yeah, that's where that came. I don't have a brand, but it is an H-frame. So if you look up H-frame easel, you're going to get those. And they run anywhere. Usually 1 to 200 is pretty average for an easel like this. But you want something, or I prefer something that's very heavyweight. So when I'm pushing, like if I push really hard, the canvas isn't sliding back. Now I have to create brush strokes again. But it's not sliding back, and I was putting a lot of pressure on that canvas, and it doesn't go anywhere. If you use a really flimsy easel, if you push on a canvas like that, the whole thing will kind of flop over or slide away. Anthony says, what was the video linked in the hack video titles? It was linked back to their channel that said, more coming soon, and it had one video. That was it. It was like static. It was something weird. It was stupid. The funny thing is they do this and they try to say we're white hackers, which is not actually a term I would use for them at all. Really, I don't know that that's even a term I would use for anybody. But anyway, that they tried to make it sound like they weren't really doing anything bad or wrong to hurt anybody, and it's like, you guys don't even, yeah, they are definitely, the fact that they've taken all of our information and already emailed me concerns me. Like, what else are you going to do with this information? But we'll see. Paul Hunter says, there's nothing wrong with your voice. It's yours and you should be proud of it. Oh, thank you. You know, it's funny. My voice never bugged me that much other than the fact that I can't sing. Me attempting to sing, I have no control. Like, I have a vocal range of 2 notes. And anything else, I'm crackly and it's bad and it's not okay. But other than that, like talking wise, it never occurred to me. I know I talk fast. People have always complained about that my entire life. I mean, since I was 4 years old, people have been complaining that I talk too fast. But as far as like the pitch of my voice, I never saw it as being an issue. It surprised me when I'd see people complain about that. It was like, not something that had ever crossed my mind, but great, thanks. It's what we all want, more things to be self-conscious of. But it doesn't actually bother me. I mean, I joke about it, but no one in person has ever complained about anything other than me just talking fast. Where's the brush that I want? I guess it's not in here. This one will have to do. I'm switching to, this one is a Taklon Bristled Filbert. It's a number 2, so it's a little bit smaller. I'm going to put some thick chunks with white. Now I am going to come on top of this a lot thicker to start forming these clouds. And I'm kind of twisting and turning the brush. I'm hitting a lot of these on the tops of them. Patty Picasso says, you sound American. There's a good reason for that. Painting Violet Sky says, hi, Lisa. Any tips for choosing a layout? Do you follow the rule of thirds? You know, it's funny because the rule of thirds is not something I ever thought much about. It's just how I paint. I mean, I didn't even know what it was when I first started painting, and it was funny to me because I could take those older paintings and put the rule of thirds over it, and they fell within the rule of thirds. You know, your eye naturally wants to lay things nicely that way. Well, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, I follow the rule of thirds, but not necessarily because I put the rule of thirds on there. That's just what was appealing to my eye, and it happened to fall within the rule of thirds. Does that make any sense? I feel like I'm talking in circles there. But so yes, technically I do. Not necessarily like I'm looking at it going, okay, where's the rule of thirds? I need to divide my painting in thirds and here and here. I don't necessarily think of it that way. Occasionally I do. There are occasions that I'm having trouble with a layout and something doesn't seem right, and I can put the rule of thirds over and go, okay, that's what's wrong, and readjust accordingly. But most of the time, it's not something I really think about. It's just something that I naturally do, just because that is very appealing. The rule of thirds isn't put together as necessarily like a math equation. It's a thing because that's what's appealing to our eye, and it's appealing without necessarily needing to know that that's why it's appealing. If that makes any sense. See if I can scroll without scrolling too far. Eric Draws wants to know if I listen to self-help books. No, I actually never have. I'm a big fan of fantasy fiction books. So I've actually never listened to one that was not a fiction. So I'm not saying there's wouldn't be good to. I just have not. JPC13 Art says, when are you going to read A Court of Thorns and Roses? It's so good. Probably eventually. I don't know. We'll see. Oh, scrolled too far. Dang it, I was being so careful not to let that happen, too. Scrolling. Okay. Chloe says, are you into any Netflix shows or TV shows in general that you like? And what is the difference between turpentine and linseed oil? I think you mean linseed oil. And turpentine is like a paint. It's what you would clean your brushes with. While some artists do use it to thin the paint, like here, I used a bit of paint thinner. Mona Lisa odorless paint thinner is what I use instead of turpentine. Turpentine, turpenoid, the odor on that, it's like instant headache. It's horrible, and it never gets out of your brushes. Horrible. Hate the stuff. But I use the Mona Lisa odorless paint thinner. Now, I don't generally use it to paint with. Like here, I used it to pull paint up to get that texture I wanted in the background. But linseed oil would be what I use as liquid. It's a mixing medium. You use it to thin the paint. It also causes it to be more translucent. But you're keeping the paint fairly what they would call fat in using the oil versus using the paint thinner. If you're using the paint thinner, the turpentine, any of that, you're making a thin layer. You're making what would be considered a lean layer. So you would want those to be your first layers. If you're going to use that, you wouldn't want to use it on final layers because then you're not following the fat over lean rule. And I already know somebody's going to ask about it, so I will explain that now. Essentially what fat over lean is, you can see how I'm using thicker paint here. I've got my liquid mixed in with it. This is well, for me, a fat layer. It's not what a normal oil painter who paints thickly would consider a fat layer. This would still be lean in most cases. But it's, that is a terrible shape. What have I done to that cloud? No, I don't know what's going on here, so we'll just cover some of that up. But the fat over lean, what happens, the reason you want this, you want your thicker paint on top of thinner paint, and thinner paint happens when you thin things out with your paint thinner. I don't generally do that, so it's not something I really consider, and most of my layers are the same thickness, so because mostly I glaze, so it's not something I have to consider too often. But what happens, let's say I'm painting with a palette knife. Painted with a palette knife, and then I decided to glaze, use paint thinner, thin the paint down, glazed over it. I could cause what was done with a palette knife, that thick paint, the fat paint, could crack and peel and cause all kinds of problems as the turpentine, the thinner layer, dries faster. And because that's going to dry faster than what's underneath it, that is going, and I use the term dry, but technically the term would be cure. It doesn't dry like acrylic paint would. It's different, the way that works. But it can cause cracking and such. So if you put a layer that is thin down with your paint thinner, thin, just really, really thin on top of a thick layer, that's going to cause cracking and different problems later on down the road. So you want to avoid that. You want to have your thinnest layers first. So here, this is going to be my thinnest layer in the background. I've used a lot of the liquid and I've used some paint thinner. That's very thin and I'm putting thick on top of that, but I wouldn't want to reverse that or I could cause problems. So moving down. Don't scroll too far. Let's see. Kelly Paint says, do you feel like you're realistic and studies help you to accomplish pieces like the one you're doing now? I feel like everything helps you with everything. The more you know how to do, no matter what it is, the better it is. I mean, the painting that I did today, I combined the realism and the pop art. Other paintings I've done just with pop art helped me to do that kind of painting. So I think that they all, everything helps everything else, if that makes sense. Well, like here, because I'm not working from a reference photo, I've painted so many trees, I know what tree bark looks like, and I'm not going for realistic anyway. But if I was, I would get either way. I would be using a reference photo. But no, I feel like everything I've done in the past has helped me. Even if it was as simple as I did something and realized, well, that looks terrible, I'm not going to do that again. That still helps me. Everything I've ever done, I think, helps and leads to getting to where you're doing it's helpful when you get to whether you're doing another style or the same style you've been doing in the past. Everything's helpful. Colin says, when working in graphite, how do you keep something white? I'm very careful. Glassine. Invest in glassine. Glassin. That stuff, it won't stick. So like, let's say I'm using tracing paper to keep under my hand so I'm not smudging stuff around. The graphite can stick to the tracing paper. And then when I move the tracing paper over, that can create a smudge. Glassine, nothing sticks to. So that really makes a big difference. But you just have to be super careful. Leave white areas white. Like I'm talking about if you're trying to keep a background white. Now, let's see it's smaller detail. You needed a shine in the eye to stay white. I just work around it. And the same thing, I'm very careful as I work. Bigelow Fine Arts wants to know, when the clouds fall off the trees, do they float up? I have not thought that far in advance, honestly. Good question. Kaneho says he hates my voice. It's funny. I know people get offended. They're like, oh my gosh, that's so mean. Kaneho's a friend. I've known him for years now. We've emailed back and forth several times, and that is his sense of humor. And it doesn't bother me because I know he's kidding. He actually also emailed me a little while ago really nice things. So it's just Kaneho. I know some people will get offended on my behalf, but he's actually somebody I know. It's not like a stranger. Now, if a stranger was saying that sort of thing to me, I'd be like, what the heck is wrong with you? But it's Kaneho. I know there's something wrong with him. Renee Van Alstein says, when do you know that you can sell your artwork? When somebody is willing to buy it. Honestly, it comes down to that. People want to buy it, you're ready. Now, commissions, I think, are a little bit different. Let's say I painted this. I don't know how this is going to come out, but if somebody wants to buy it, then someone can buy it. Now, if, on the other hand, somebody was like, oh, I want you to paint my dog, but I've not painted dogs before, or I've only painted one or two, I don't think it's a good idea you're not ready to take commissions until you've painted several to avoid having problems. One of the things, that's the problem with oil paint, the glare. One of the problems that commission artists have is having a client who's not happy with the end result. This is a story that I've told several people, or I've told several times, before. There was a group I was in, and there was a girl who had drawn an Italian Greyhound. She used colored pencil. It was phenomenal. She'd not done many colored pencil portraits yet. So she did this portrait. It was absolutely amazing. Well, then everyone wanted to hire her because they saw one thing that she had done that was good, and they assumed everything she did would be good. One thing's not enough to really tell. The reason that one was so good, she, for whatever reason, took more time on that, and she had an amazing reference photo. So one of my good friends hires her to paint her dogs. And the end result was horrific. Sorry, no other way to put it. It was bad. Like, this looks like you drew it with your feet. How did you go from something super hyper realistic, amazing? The client thought she was getting that, and you painted something that was not consistent. So what happened here, the artist wasn't ready to take commissions. I don't think she should have taken anything because she'd not painted enough to be able to produce consistently, or to even know the fact that she should have told the client, hey, I can't work from this reference photo. It's a bad photo. And it was a bad photo. The client provided her with a very bad photo. But the artist should have been experienced enough before she started taking commissions, should have been experienced enough to know, hey, I can't work from that. What you get from this is not what you're expecting to get from me. So that, I think taking commissions, having somebody pay you to paint something very specific is different than being ready to just sell. If you painted a dog or whatever you painted and somebody wants to buy it, then you're ready to sell. Commissions, I would say wait till you've painted, let's say you're painting pet portraits. Wait till you've painted like 10 dogs, different breeds, to where you really have a general idea of 10 or 20, a general idea of how long is it going to take you to finish a painting, what type of photo can you work from. Some artists do great working from crappy photos, most do not when they're working in realism, and usually it'll be to where you don't start out creating great even with a bad photo. The artists who do, they have painted from good photos from years while they learned, and then got to where they could work from lesser photos. But knowing that about yourself, knowing what you can accomplish is really important in determining whether or not you're ready to take commissions. So that's my tip for you there. Andrew wants to know if I use both transparent and opaque airbrush paint when making blurry backgrounds, and can you mix these paints together? Yes and yes. The opaque areas are just the areas that I want to be thicker, and a lot of times what I'll do is take an opaque white and make, like when I make the bokeh backgrounds, I'll make the circles, and then use a transparent color on top to tint the color, so it works like a glaze. But that's what I do a lot. Yes, I do mix the two. Oops, and scrolled too far. Dang it. It's a weird thing with the chat. When I'm trying to keep it in one area, it automatically wants to jump to the bottom, and then I have to scroll up forever to try to get back where I was. Oh gosh, go back. Okay, here we go. Paul Hunter says, my friend is a white hatter and says they are not, and they should claim to be. White hatters do not do anything that would harm anyone. Oh, the hacker. Yeah. They are self-promotion egotists. Yeah. This one definitely, yeah, those hackers definitely were hurting people in what they've done. And I mean, even now, I'm already getting spam that I didn't normally get from companies who want to rank #1 on Google SEO. And you used to get some of that, but I'm getting it worse than I was. So yeah, that email, frustrating. It took me a minute. I didn't know what your question was. It didn't click what my brain was on art at that time. Kelly Paint says, if you like fantasy books, First Life and Lifeblood by Gina Showalter is amazing. I'll have to look into those. Thank you. Let's see, scrolling down. Picks by Lise says, the Memory Wake trilogy by Selena French are 3 great fantasy books. Thank you for that recommendation. Paint Violent Sky says, so less liquid on the last layers. Well, liquid is considered to be fat, but it's also fast drying. So let's say I painted something with a palette knife. I'm probably not going to use much liquid on anything I paint on top. So I wouldn't be like glazing color over it. Would just not chance that. But I mean, if it's something where everything like this is not super thick, this I can use liquid on top of and really I'm not going to have any problems. So it just depends. It's not one of those things where I can say this is always the rule. It depends on how thick are each of your layers. Thicker paint is paint that has, like the thickest paint you're going to get is paint that has no mixing medium. It's just the paint. That would be your fattest layer. And when you paint with a palette knife, that's essentially what you're doing. You don't generally mix much in the way of mixing medium when painting with a palette knife. So those would be very, very thick. I would not put anything with liquid on top of something like that that's as fat as the paint could possibly be. Because the top layers would dry super, super fast, and then what's underneath would not. So that would be an issue. But it just depends on how much paint you have. Usually, the further you get going, you're going to go less and less. But again, like I said before, scroll too far. Like I said before, most of my layers are very similar. I'm very, very similar. I don't have a lot that's super thick or super thin. And I'm going to better define this. One of the things I'll be doing tomorrow after this dries is defining my edges a little bit better. Maybe. I don't know. I'm kind of liking this rougher look too. So many decisions. This is what happens when I start experimenting. I change my mind every 5 minutes. Like, oh, that looks cool. I kind of want to leave it like that. Mazzino says, have you spent time yourself studying color theory? I know it's touted as not being a very particularly important. Thank you. No, I have not actually. I mean, I've read a few things here and there that were great tips, but I've not really heavily studied it. It's not something with me with art. It's kind of a funny thing. Like I never really got into art history until later on. I started becoming like, I'm really interested in Van Gogh. His life fascinates me. The mental illness and then part of it being self-induced with the absinthe and then the syphilis and all the stuff that kind of made him nuts, or it contributed to making him nuts. All of that fascinates me, I think, because as I've mentioned to you guys before in other videos, my bio dad is schizophrenic. And seeing what someone was able to accomplish like Van Gogh, given the challenges mentally that he was facing, absolutely fascinates me. I love reading about his life. But most as far as art history goes and studying this and that, I've never paid that much attention to. I just jumped into, I enjoy the process of painting more than studying and reading. So I just jumped into painting. And if I was having a problem, like, why is this happening? I could, maybe if I read it in a book, it would make sense because I'd experienced it and I didn't really have to necessarily study. I just read it once and was like, okay, that makes sense. I had that problem. Okay, right now I just look like I have white trees. So tempted to blend this a little and put rougher marks on top. Decisions. Actually, no, I'm going to glaze color on it when it dries. I'm going to leave those trees alone and I'm going to start working on the bark. So what I'm going to do, if you're painting in oil like this brush would work. Oh, actually I want a flat brush. Well, I'll show you anyway. This brush, if I wanted to use this, it's got a lot of white on it. If I want to switch to brown and use the same brush, all I'm going to do is take my paper towel and pinch the paint off. If I really want to clean it, I can go ahead and use my paint thinner, which is next to me, and then go back to painting. Or in this case, because I've pinched most of that paint off, I could just start painting with this because I'm going to a darker color. I wouldn't actually even need to rinse this brush. I can go from a light color to a dark color. Now, if it was the other way around, let's say I had a bunch of brown on that brush and wanted to switch to white, then I'm going to wipe the brush off and I'm going to clean it in paint thinner. I'm a little bit different. You guys know I'm a brush hoarder. I just grab a clean brush. So I've got a brush for white, a brush for brown, a brush for, one for darks, one for lights. That's kind of how I go with it. And with the color theory question, I'm not saying it's not good to study color theory. I'm saying I think it's more helpful to start painting, and then if you need to study color, if you're having difficulties, go ahead and study stuff or study stuff later. But I think starting painting is more important than starting to study it first. I think it will make more sense if you have experienced and you're like, oh, I know that those colors look bad when I put them next to each other, or what happens. So when you read the reasons why, it makes a lot more sense than reading the reasons why first. Okay, scrolling, and we'll attempt not to go too far again. Lori Barnett says, have you ever used oil bars instead of liquid paint? Like oil pastels? I've used those. I don't know what an oil bar is, though. So I'm going to go with no. S.L. Rogers Bird says, I love your art and thank you from a grandmother on a budget for all the free videos. Thanks for watching. Rachel wants to know if the fat over thin rule applies to acrylics at all. Sort of. The one time I experienced this being an issue was when I was painting, I do want to thin some of these out. I was painting with acrylics, and you guys have seen where I'll do the weird backgrounds where I'll spray water on top of the acrylics and kind of let it blur together so it's almost like a pour. There we go. We'll just get some thicker brush strokes mixed in there. This brush I've wiped the paint off of, and I'm just kind of making a few in there. My brush strokes were starting to get too uniform. I think that's what was bugging me, these little ones. But I had really thick paint, and then I put water on, a lot of water on the thick paint. The thick paint was not dry yet. I didn't blend it out like I know I've now since learned to do, and it caused it to crack all the way down. It was a really cool effect, and I actually made it work with the painting. I changed, that background was going to be for a carousel horse, and it ended up being kind of dark and, I don't know, metal looking, like something you see on a metal CD brand or cover. So I ended up turning it into torn wings. But yeah, it caused it, putting the thin water on top of wet, thick paint and letting it dry. I took a hairdryer to it, letting it dry like that. It dried weird. So yes, it does apply for acrylic, but that was a bit of a different situation because I had the paint laying flat. I had thick paint and just dumped a ton of water on top. It wasn't a normal way to paint. Like when you're painting with your brush, it's not really something you ever have to worry about. And if your layer is completely dry, putting a thin layer on top of that, again, not something you really have to worry about. It's only when you've got wet paint, the thick wet paint, and then I put water on top, like a lot of water, and that caused it to crack weird. Unfortunately, that was before I used to make videos, so I would wish I had that on camera so I could show you guys what happened. I've actually, when making the attempt, I've never been able to replicate the exact, like, perfect amount of water versus paint to make it happen again. I mean, I know how to avoid it, but I've had a hard time getting it to happen intentionally. Meg says, every time I draw something in colored pencil, especially animals, I tend to use the colors that are too dark, but I don't realize it until it's too late. Yeah, you want to get in the habit, especially with colored pencil, of painting lighter than you think you're going to need to go. You can always go back and darken stuff. Really hard to go back and lighten it up. So that's just a habit you want to be in when you're working with colored pencils, is start lighter than you need to be and slowly build up to your darks. It makes it much easier to control. See, and this is a case I've got to be careful not to overdo these brush strokes. I want the brush strokes to show, but if I take an area and make brush stroke after brush stroke after brush stroke, what I'm going to do is create one solid color, and I won't have the definite lights and darks anymore. Meg said, with the colored pencil question, the end result looks realistic, but nothing like the reference photo when it comes to color. Any tips? Yeah, start from light to dark, but if it looks realistic and you like it, that's okay too. Having it darker than you intended isn't necessarily bad, but I do know what you mean. Like, I like to have the control of deciding if it's lighter or darker, and that is just start lighter and build up to darker when working with colored pencils. Andrew says, how do you block in colors when you are the type of person that dives straight into details? You've got to train yourself not to do that. I think that that's a big deal. Like when you're blocking in, experience will help. Because if you start with details, it's probably not going to come out quite like you wanted anyway. But yeah, just training yourself, being aware of it, I think, is a big deal. It's really easy to have the same mistake happen again and again, but you don't realize why it's happening or what's going on. But the fact that you know you're tending to jump into details right away before blocking in color, that's a good thing to know. Now, again, I'm assuming you don't like the result you're getting. If you're starting with detail and just working out constant detail and you like the result you're getting, then that's okay. I have seen people do that. It's not my way to work, but it is, you know, any way that gets you to the end result that you like the way it's coming out. As long as it's archival, it's okay. Just because I do something one way doesn't mean it's the only way or the right way. It's the best way for me. And knowing me, I'll change my mind in 5 minutes anyway and try something different regardless. I tend to not do the same thing twice. But that's, if you don't like the results you're getting, the big thing is just to be aware of that. And one thing that you can do is take your reference photo and put it across the room. So if you're printing it on a piece of paper, or even if you're working on an iPad and you've got the reference photo there, put it across the room so it's little and away from you, and just you're not even able to see the details. I think that will help you to avoid putting in more details than you intended, just because you can't see them anymore. Make your reference photo little so you're just really focusing on where your lights and your darks go. That can help. You can also play with Photoshop a little bit. They've got tools that will allow you, oh, by the way, this brush is a synthetic hog-haired bristle, or filbert. This is a number 6 by Master's Touch. This is what I'm going to start using for my tree bark. But anyway, certain Photoshop filters you can put on it to give it almost like almost a pop art type feel or a stamp, you can remove the detail. Use that as your reference photo for blocking in the color, and it'll prevent you from doing too much detail. Or it's one trick that can help you do it, I should say. Whoops, scroll too far. We're all shocked. Paul says oil bars are made by Winsor & Newton are basically bars of semi-solid oil paint. No, I've never even heard of those. That's interesting. El Chapo says, have you heard of the movie called Loving Vincent? It's an animated movie about Vincent van Gogh. All the families were individually painted in oil instead of hand-drawn. No, I've not. I'll have to look into that. I tried to watch one. It was on Netflix, I think. It was Netflix or Amazon years ago, and I forget which one it was, but it was bad. It was one where the people were like, and this is one of the things I've always hated, like art history books that I have read, and it's one of the reasons that I don't have much interest in them. They have a tendency to say, okay, if you made this type, like almost dream interpretation. If you paint this, they made this sort of brush stroke, so they were feeling this at this time, and they were like, I don't know, they tend to attribute feelings to things that I don't think really exist, and it drives me crazy. And I know that just because I've seen people try to do it with my art. You know, oh, the artist was feeling this or that when they painted. No, you're not even close. I wasn't feeling any of those things. I was happy, in a good mood, and I just liked those colors. So those type of movies that they're like, he was feeling this, he was feeling that, stating it as fact, stating it as might have, I'm fine with. That's great. That's fine. But to the way that the one that I was watching was like, actually, I want to say this was in first person. They were talking like it was Vincent van Gogh, looking back at his life or something like that, but trying to like say he felt and did and said, I don't know. It got bizarre. It always has driven me crazy about art history type things, or people who study art history who think that they know everything that artists felt and thought, and just based on the painting. Oh no, I think they attribute a bit too many feelings to things that probably, some things maybe were that way, or the artist maybe was feeling some of those ways, but more often than not, I feel like they're just attributing their own emotions onto the art, which is fine. But to make the statement that this is what the artist was feeling and why he painted that, that's always been one of those things that drove me nuts. I don't know why. I'm a crazy person myself, apparently. Pigs by Lee says there's a big birthday card waiting for you in your P.O. box. Oh, thank you. Tracking said it was there. I hope it was. I'll have to go look because on Monday will be the next day I can get over there. My husband, we checked it when we dropped off the Patreon postcards, the February ones, because I'm always late. But we dropped off the February postcards this month, or on Monday night, and the mailbox, the key is broken, or not working on it. We think they changed the key or changed the lock and didn't tell us. I'm up to date. I'm paid for like the next year. So it's not like it's behind or anything. And the last time we went, the guy made it sound like it was just, there was too much in it and it was full, and that's why it wouldn't open. And he was actually kind of a jerk to us. But apparently that's not the case, because we just went this week and it still isn't, still won't open. So we have to go during office hours, which means not till Monday to go check that. But thank you. I will go look for that on Monday. Oops, and scroll too far again. Hooray. Oh, I wish this chat was a little bit smoother so that didn't constantly happen. Meg says, thank you. Yeah, I don't mind as long as the end result is realistic, but when it comes to having skills for a commission, matching the colors perfectly is a big deal. Oh, absolutely. I've had to do that before, where someone sent me a photo, and on my monitor, the colors of the pet looked very different on one screen than it did on another. So that alone can be a huge deal, and I've had to go back and change stuff. So no, I definitely know what you mean. So yeah, learning to master or control the colors is a big deal. But as long as you're being, really focusing on light to dark, that will help you control things by a lot. So getting some of these branches in here, and I'll have to switch to a liner brush for some of these smaller branches. Schizoid says, hi Lisa, I'm glad you're not hacked anymore. Yeah, everything looks to be back to normal. We'll see how that ends up. And the drama still continues, but the channel right now is okay. So what I'm doing is just getting a solid. This is my Van Dyke Brown, and I'm just filling this in solid. I'm going to come back through with highlights and such later. This is one of the things I love with oil paint. It's still going to be wet when I come back through with those highlights, so I don't have to worry about it drying and not blending nicely. I can just block in colors where I want them. Basically, I get to be lazy. You're not in so much of a rush when you're painting with these as you are with acrylics, which is nice. And it's one of the reasons that somebody learning to paint in oils usually has an easier time of mastering them than with acrylics. Acrylic is very hard to learn how to blend nicely. However, if you learn to blend with acrylics, you can blend with anything. Herb's Roll says, I agree. High school, I chose art class and there was more focus on the artwork and artist analysis than the actual technique or prac work. I doubt they felt any that in depth for everyone. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that an artist can't have massive emotion tied to a painting. I'm saying that I've seen people overreach on my own, and I suspect that that is largely the thing with some of these other artists too. Yeah, that movie with the Van Gogh, I made it about 10 minutes and was like, yeah, no, this is not happening. It's kind of nice with art these days with the internet and how we track everything and everyone shares everything. You're not going to have that many questions as far as what an artist felt. Where's my brown? What an artist was feeling when they painted certain things. Because we've all posted about everything on social media. So that information is kind of really out there, I think. There's no real secret. Unless we end up in one of the apocalypse-like events from one of my books and we no longer have internet and then we're all guessing again. There are even zombies in that book I was listening to. It had all the things. You know it's good if there's zombies. There's another book that I listened to. It was The Ex-Heroes, and it was superheroes, like people who had like Superman powered strength and different things like that, and the zombie apocalypse all in one. Those are fun, and it's got a lot, like the narration on that is excellent. It's got several narrators, and it is so good, and those are definitely fun books. I've read a couple of those. I haven't read all in the series, but those ones were pretty fun. Simone says, when blocking in, do you start with the darkest or the mid-tone color? Also, do you glaze darker color on top of your animals to create the shadow portion of paint in that? Yes to everything when blocking in. I usually start with a mid-tone when blocking in, usually. In this case, this is the color I had out, and I'm being lazy, and so this is the color I'm using. Quite often it's as simple as that. Although, an art historian could read more emotion into that. No, it's just that I'm being lazy. But usually I'll start with a mid-range because it makes it easy to go up and down from there. With colored pencil, then I generally will start with my lightest tone and build from dark. But yeah, I do regularly glaze my shadows in the darker areas over. Usually. The thing is, when I paint, it's never the same way twice. Well, I don't want to say it's never the same way twice, but I'm always changing things. I'm always trying something new and changing stuff up. And when you're painting, the nice thing here, you can go over layers in a way that you can't easily do with colored pencil. So with colored pencil, if I go too dark, I'm not only going to be able to lighten it to a certain extent. With painting, I can come back through with more opaque colors, cover it, and then redo it if I didn't like the result that I had. So it's going to be a little bit different. And how I can approach that. I don't know what just happened there, but I don't like it. Get out. Actually, we'll just put some... There we go, problem solved. That was a lot of bark. Oops, scrolled too far. Of course I did. Pix by Lee says, if the leaves are clouds, does that mean the seeds are the raindrops? So I am going to paint rain coming down off these, even though they're not actually storm clouds, but that will be happening. Oddity Transformation says, what are your thoughts on fluid art? Do you prefer mixing your acrylic paints with a mixing medium, or do you prefer high flow acrylics? I actually have not really gotten into high flow acrylics much. I've done the Liquitex pouring medium, but as far as like the actual high flow acrylics and all of those, I've not played with those. I love the look though, and I love the look that the pouring medium gets. So it's something that I may play with in the future, but it's not something I currently have a lot of experience with. Scrolling back down and trying not to go too far. Ender says, if I can't afford or find Frisket, are there any substitutes? Can I use parchment paper for tracing paper taped onto the airbrushing? By the way, thank you so much for all your answers. It's not the same. Frisket, it's going to stick really well to the paper. And there are other brands that make low tack tape like that. I have used other brands. There was one that I had gotten this huge roll from Coast Airbrush years ago. That lasted forever. But getting it in a roll will last a lot longer than the individual sheets. The individual sheets you blow through pretty quickly. I prefer the one in the roll, if that helps. But yeah, it's not... The parchment paper and doing all that, it's not going to be the same because it's not going to stick down, so your paint is more likely to run down underneath if you've painted heavy or airbrushed heavy. You can use it to an extent. I mean, you see me use stencils, and it's going to be similar. That's basically what you're doing with the parchment paper, is making a stencil. So it can be used, but the end result, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. You may get some effects you didn't anticipate. Painting Violet Skies says, I would love to see a video on painting black fur, long and short. Yeah, I'm sure I will sometime in the future. I think I've got some reference photos of black wolves that I could do. Rachel Murphy says, was the movie of Vincent van Gogh painted with words with Benedict Cumberbatch in it? I don't know if it would drive you crazy, but it has Benedict reading the letters Van Gogh wrote. Now that'd be interesting. Reading, like, I want to read the actual facts and not a ton of speculation on the feelings. I don't know. I'm more interested in the facts than what somebody thinks the person's feelings were. Because anytime you attribute feelings to somebody and you're not that person, you're basically just projecting your own feelings, what you would be feeling like if you were in that situation, and it's not necessarily the same. So, yeah. And scroll too far again. Oh, no, I didn't. I'm good. Wow. Mazzino says, I'm curious as to why you think the reputation and the personal connections an artist has plays such a major role in the valuation of one's art, sarcastically. Boy asks fun questions. I think that the reputation artist has, their reputation plays such a huge role in the value of their art, because facts say that it does, because history and experience and anyone who's sold art says that those things play a role, that is what impacts the value of art. It's not, I don't know, people like to get all up in arms about stuff and be like, no, that's not the truth. Like, one of the ones that always cracks me up when I talk about how important who you are is and how you present yourself and those sorts of things. When I really talk about those, I get people who get so mad because they're like, no, I don't need social media. I don't need to put my face online. I don't need this or that. I can, I want the art to speak for itself. Great. And you're probably not going to be very successful, because most artists who do that are not very successful in their careers at this point. Those things matter. Who you are in art has always mattered. And so I don't know, that always kind of makes me laugh when people get super angry about stuff like that. No, you don't. It's not true. That's not how it is. It's all about the art. No, it's actually not. If it wasn't, then why is it that artists who are not as skilled as another artist in any given subject, medium, style, let's say they're both aiming for the same thing, you may have the one who's technically doing a better job artistically, not doing as well financially or success-wise in general, notoriety, anything, getting into art galleries, whatever, may not do as well as the other artist because he is not known. That matters. So yeah, it's always funny when people get mad about that sort of thing. No, it isn't. Okay, well, have fun not making a living as an artist, because with that attitude, you probably are not going to. But I mean, go with the experience that people are telling you. People don't make that stuff up to be mean and try to force you to do things that you don't want to do. Like it's nothing to do with that. It's to do with the fact that we know, as it's proven that to be the case over and over again. And it makes sense. I mean, people are buying into the artist more than they are the art. They buy into the art because they like the artist. The artist fascinates them for some reason, or they like the artist's personality or whatever else. And that generally happens at this point in time because social media, what they've seen on social media. Unless you're doing a lot of local art shows and you're actually getting out there and meeting people. These branches, by the way, I will be putting some of these, like where it just stops, I will be putting cloud bits over it in here and there. So they're not just going to stop like they do here. But yeah, it's just how the art world works. It's how buyers feel. Buyers want to know the artist. They want something that's of value. Let's look at brand name clothing, for example. A brand name purse, let's say you've got a... trying to think of a name. I don't know, a Coach purse. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a higher quality than a generic one or that it's going to last any longer. It's the name that you're paying for, the style and the brand that Coach has built for themselves. People want the name. It's not necessarily an indication that it's better made. And I know more goes into that because they may stand behind a guarantee that the generic stuff from Target doesn't stand behind. But for the most part, my sister's one who likes to have every purse, the really expensive, like she'll spend $600 on a purse and have $20 in her bank account. I don't know that she does that anymore, but she used to when she was younger. Those purses didn't last any longer than my cheap stuff. Actually, my cheap stuff I think lasted longer. So but that just goes to show she wasn't buying them because she thought they were going to last longer. She was buying them because the name and how she wanted to buy into that name. And it's the same with art. The people who buy the art want to buy into the name, the artist. When you get up to a certain level, I think when you're starting out, it's when people just want a painting, artists who are, or buyers who are spending only a couple $100 probably are not as worried about the artist's name as they are just getting that cool painting. But when you get into art that people are selling for thousands of dollars, $10,000, $20,000, they're buying the name. They are not necessarily buying for quality. They like the artist, obviously. It can't just be that they like the artist's name. They've got to like what the artist is producing. That does go hand in hand, but they're definitely buying into that name because no matter what you produce, somebody else is doing pretty much the same thing, and somebody is probably doing the same thing for less than you are. Someone somewhere is. Wow, words are hard. So that name is what's going to separate you from that other artist. There's so much that goes into that. I could ramble about this for the next 2 hours. But it's one of those things that people get so worked up about that they don't want it to be about the artist. They don't want to put themselves out there, and so they insist that it's not true. Well, I can insist that the moon doesn't, isn't in the sky right now. That doesn't mean it's not true. Actually, I don't even know if the moon's out tonight. But I mean, you can insist whatever you want. Facts show that what I'm talking about is true. That when you get into that, especially the higher, my brain has apparently shut down. What time is it? Yeah, we're almost at 10. That's why my brain is shutting down. But when you get into the higher end, it really does come down to the name as much as the art. Alicia Rogers says, I just finished my first portrait commission and it must be shipped tomorrow to arrive on time, but it's not varnished. Is it safe to apply a thin coat of spray varnish for now? Your first commission, is it oil or acrylic? If it's acrylic, I would varnish it right now and ship it tomorrow night, or as late as you can tomorrow so it has time to air dry. You'd probably be okay, but I'm not going to lie, it's kind of bad planning on your part. Not that I've not done it myself, but when you guys are taking commissions, plan for that. Make sure you plan for that sort of thing to happen. Now, another option is to let the buyer know they could varnish it. Most buyers are not going to be interested in that. They want it finished. But if you send it without the varnish, you're sending them an unfinished product. That's not really cool. So in order to get there on time, I would ask the buyer, what reason does it need to be there? Is it for somebody's birthday? Let them know, hey, there's no varnish on this. I can make it, here are your options. I can add the varnish myself and ship it a day later, 2 days later. I don't know if it's oil or acrylic, but ship it later. Or my phone is blinking and that is distracting me. Ship it later, and you can give them a card saying, you know, if it was a birthday, you're getting this painting. Here's the finished one. We're just waiting for the varnish to dry. That's going to give them the highest quality product, and that matters. Your other option, I would tell them, I can ship this tomorrow. It does not have a varnish. I can take off $10. You can go buy the varnish yourself and apply it, and I'll tell you how to do it, or I'll make a video for you showing you how to do it. They may like to do that, and it can air dry for them there. So those are probably the two options I would go with, but I wouldn't chance providing the client with an unfinished product. It doesn't have the varnish, without giving them the option, letting them know, you know, it's just running late. You do not want to get in the habit of having, providing not your best to clients, I should say. Chloe wants to know if I'm still going to collaborate with Lena Daniel. I've been waiting for that video. You know, I haven't talked to her lately. It's one of those things we are going to do. I've got some ideas for the collaboration. We hadn't decided really what exactly we were going to do, but yeah, I need to talk to her about that. I have been so busy. I'm like, I can't think of planning stuff. So yeah, we need to though. I think that would be a lot of fun. Rose Bishop says, check out the House of Night series. It has a very complex story with depth, friendship, romance, and suspense. It can really inspire some cool surreal work. At least it inspires me. I will have to look into that. House of Night. Yeah, birthday gift. It's an oil painting. Ooh, moving and illness caused a delay, but I did plan poorly. I wouldn't do it. I would not even chance any, the spray varnish. The Gamblin Gamvar, that one, wow, I'm tired. That one is wonderful, and it will cause it to dry fast, but I don't think the painting you've done, if it's ready for that varnish, I wouldn't send it for a week or so. I would contact them and let them know, hey, I was sick, moved, whatever the situation was, here are your options right now. I can send it to you now. The painting is ready to ship, but it does not have a varnish on it. I can send it to you. You can put the varnish on it, and it'll be dry enough to hand to them. I wouldn't put it in wrapping paper, but let them know that, or you can varnish it and give them a high quality, you know, send them a good image of it that they can print and put in the card that you are getting this painting. It's just taking longer than anticipated, but I would let them know. I would be upfront. I think it's better than providing an unfinished product, but that's just me. Sass says, how long do you wait to varnish your oil over acrylic pieces? I was told to wait 6 months, but I'm doing very thin layers as I'm following your methods. I use Gamvar, the Gamblin Gamvar we were talking about, and I have a video showing you how I varnish that. If you look up, it may be on the front page of my YouTube channel, but that one, I paint in thin layers, and basically when it's dry to the touch, when I rub my hand like this and nothing smears, it is ready for the oil paint now, or for that varnish. Or like I've got a couple areas that are a little bit thicker. If those are mushy, it's not ready for it. All that has to be dry. But if you're painting in thin layers like me, usually a couple of days, you're ready to put that over. I personally wait at least 3 days, usually till it feels dry to the touch, because I'm paranoid and I just flick paint all over. But that is the one that I use. Yeah, using normal varnishes, those you need to wait. I was just working out where I flicked paint, so I don't have those dots there. Those you do need to wait 6 months until it's dry. But the Gamvar by Gamblin am I saying that right? I think I'm just mixing up all my words at this point. That one, you don't have to wait. You can wait until it's dry to the touch. So that is my favorite. And I can stop recording that. We're pretty much done for the night. I'll answer a couple more questions if you guys want to ask some. Yeah, and one of the things that you're seeing on this video, it looks like my clouds are super, let's see if I'm only at 480, that's why. Let's go to 720. The clouds look like the white is super, oh no, it still looks the same. White, it's really not. Let me see if I pull this forward, if you can kind of see a little bit better. There we go. You can see how I've still got a lot of gray. I'm still showing those brush strokes in there. But definitely have a lot to do on this, which will be finished hopefully tomorrow. I needed to have it finished tomorrow, where I'm going to be doing some more detail on the clouds and then adding the rain, and that will be next week's video. That was another dot to get rid of. I may better define this hint of, actually I definitely will better define the hint of buildings back here, and I'm going to paint a stream. So I've got a little bit more work to do tonight before I let that dry for tomorrow's painting. But this is pretty much a 2-layer oil painting. That's my hope, because it is, I'm keeping it super simple. But yeah, that is it for that. And let's see, a couple more questions. I've got Picks by Lisa. Says, any word on when the Derwent tins will be featuring your artwork? My grandma just got the Trekkel Golden Taklon brushes for me, and a small tin of Inktense to try is on the way. That's cool, and I have no idea yet. I'm really anxious, but I don't know when that's going to be. Rachel wants to know why you need to varnish your paintings. So many reasons. It protects them. First of all, it just protects them. Acrylic painting varnishes don't generally remove. Oil painting varnishes do. You can remove them from the painting. So like one story that's a good example of why you would want to varnish a painting is one person had a bunch of oil paintings in their house. There was a fire in part of the house. The paintings weren't burned, but the smoke damage made the entire canvas solid black. And these were expensive paintings. They were able to take them to somebody who was able to remove that varnish and completely restore the paintings back to their original state, but that was because that varnish was able to be removed. Different varnishes do different things, but essentially it's going to protect the painting. So that's a really important thing. But there are a lot of, there's a lot of benefits to varnishing. Somebody says they think I missed their question, but if it's not related to today's live stream, then it's all right. I did not see your question. You would have to ask that again. I'll give this stream a couple more minutes if you want to ask it again. But, yeah, I'm scrolling up, but I'm not seeing any questions. Brandon Illustration says, are we still doing the Lachri Live hashtag? Yeah, if you guys want to use hashtag Lachri Live, I can go and see what you've been painting, and everyone else can see what everyone else is painting and drawing during the live stream. I meant to mention that earlier and got all distracted with the computer and the problems. I need to do that for next week. But yeah, if you use hashtag Lachri Live, we can all look up and see what we were all painting and drawing during the live stream, and I can see your guys' work. The Cheetah Wing says, what's your advice on getting an accurate drawing without tracing? I find it hard to notice mistakes before shading. Check your work against itself. So let's say, I'll use this painting, if I can reach it. I'm trying to think of an easy way to do this because I don't want to touch the wet painting. But let's say I know the distance between here and here is the same as the distance between here and here. Or actually it would be more there and there should match up. So that's something I'm going to check on my painting. I'm going to check the drawing and go, okay, here to here and this area from here to here are the same. Is that the same on my drawing? And you just continuously check your work against itself. Like, okay, that leg is about that far. What else is that length? This area from the hair to here is about the same as here to here. So checking your work, and I don't use my fingers for that. I actually take a spare piece of paper and make a little line here to here. This is my little measurement, and then move that paper around and find something else that's that size. And you can check your measurements against yourself that way. Do that and check your work before you start painting, or if you're working in colored pencil, before you start coloring in. That will make your life so much easier. But it's definitely something that you want to be in the habit of doing. Even if you're tracing, get used to checking yourself against yourself so that when you do decide to freehand, that's something that you're very used to doing. But that is a really good question. And I'm not seeing the question come in that I missed from Afshan CK Arts. I know there's a bit of a delay, so I'm kind of waiting a minute before we stop the stream to see if that comes in. Andrew says, I told my friend that I traced my realistic drawing and she told me that I was cheating. Well, when you say realistic drawing, did you just draw an outline and call it done? And then, okay, that's not really your art. If you shaded it and did all the details and the blending and all of that, then no, that's not cheating. And what I've done, and I've had friends do that think, oh, that's easy. Okay, here's the supplies. Go for it. Let's see what you come up with. If you can't draw, and I've said this many times, if you cannot draw well on your own, tracing is not an instant win button. It shows in the finished painting or drawing. It absolutely, you can tell that someone couldn't draw on their own. It's for someone like me who can draw, and many of my portraits and everything, I mean, I've freehanded a lot of different things, and you guys cannot tell the difference between what I freehanded and what I have not. Except in a case like this, obviously I freehanded this. But there's no difference because I can draw. The difference for me is that it saves time. I can get more work done faster by skipping that step. Now, let's say somebody is not great at drawing. Tracing can help them to improve their drawing skills. It helps you to notice things you did not previously notice. So there's a benefit to it on both sides. But those who can't freehand, it's not an instant win. It's not cheating. It's a tool. That's really all it is. People who get really worked up about it are people who don't understand that, who have not used that method themselves, who have not seen what it can and can't do for you. Even artists who are amazing artists will say, oh, it's cheating. It's blah, blah, this and that. Have them trace something and see how different it is. They still have to use their drawing skills on the painting itself and knowing where to put shadows and knowing all of that stuff. So it's, like I said, not an instant win button. It is nothing more than a time saver for those of us who can draw. For those who can't draw, you can still tell in the finished product that they couldn't draw. So it doesn't even matter. I have for years taught this method of tracing things. And there have been times where I traced things or drew, even if I freehanded, if I didn't want to trace it, just freehanded stuff quickly for the student and still had the student completely kind of screw that up as they were learning. When they were learning to get more realistic, the original, what they did was not realistic. Just because I had it drawn out perfect was not a guarantee. They can eventually get there. So I'm not bashing people who start out not drawing realistic or painting their stuff great or super realistic. But the point is, like I said, it's not this instant win, everything's going to be good like people think it is. If an artist has used those tools, used those techniques, they tend to have a better understanding of what it can and can't do. The people who hate it and think it's evil are the people who don't know that, or people who have not taught people how to use it well. Kaneho is proposing marriage again, and he could be proposing to any of us. It's hard to tell with him. Franklin says, do you have any cheap oil asked colored pencil options? Cheap asked colored pencil. No. Well, do you want your work to be very good? Okay, so here's the thing. You have pencils like the Marco Refined colored pencils that you get on Amazon for like $12. You get a set of 40 or something like that. Those aren't terrible. They're not light fast. They say they're not. They are not light fast at all. They are not going to layer and there's not as much pigment in those. So you're not going to get the same result with those as you would a higher quality pencil. And I'm going to be reviewing that and showing you guys the difference soon. But at the same time, I do think that you can learn to layer and that you can learn to blend with those. They did layer and they did blend. They don't have the high pigment that quality pencils do. So I think it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're just getting the hang of blending and layering and you're not going to sell your work, the Marco Refine, whatever cheap, they're meant for coloring books. Those colored pencils on Amazon are really cheap and they will help you to learn layering and blending. They can be frustrating though because you're not going to get the same color saturation, the same pigment saturation that you would get with the higher quality pencils. And those ones, I don't even remember. I want to say those were oil. I don't remember. They felt, I don't know. I don't actually remember now. But those are just a cheap colored pencil that you can kind of learn with them. You can learn some things. I would say for kids, like if somebody was a minor, or not, I don't even want to say minor. I want to say like preteen. I would say go with those Marco Refined pencils. Those are fine. But when you get to the point where you're trying to do things that are a bit more advanced, then save up. Just get a handful, a small amount of quality pencils, then a big batch of crappy pencils. It really does make a difference. But yeah, I would definitely say it depends. There's too many factors there to know. Patty Picasso says, what is the finished piece going to look like? Pretty much like this, just more bold. I'm going to get more fog. I'm going to define the buildings in the background a little bit more. I'm going to make the color in the background, the teal color, which I don't even think is looking that, it kind of looks teal on the video. I'm going to make that a little bit more bold. I'm going to have a stream come through here, and I want this kind of foggy, misty base, and then rain coming from the cloud trees. But this is very similar to what the end result is going to be. I'm going to work on contrast and values is the big thing that I'll be adjusting on this. Well, we are at 10:10, so I am going to wrap this up. I want to thank you guys so much for joining, and thank you to the moderators, Joseph and Valerie. Check out their channels. I've got links in the video description, and subscribe to them as a thank you for helping us with these live streams. I could not do this without their help. And thank you guys so much for joining us. Let's see. Next week, I think might be something in colored pencil. I think something small and with an airbrush, depending on, unless this takes too long to finish, then I've got to do something much smaller. But I think it's going to be something with an airbrush background because I want to play with those golden acrylic or airbrush paints, and colored pencil for the subject. I just don't know what yet that's going to be. I think it's going to be a fairly small piece though. But that is it for tonight. Thank you guys again so much for joining, and I will see you next week. Bye.